Jimin shouts at Jungkook. What he said next left everyone speechless. A shocking outburst, a buried secret, and one sentence that changes everything. Jimin and Jungkook face a truth no one was ready for. Stop pretending you don't remember, Jungkook. The room froze. The sharp crack of Jimin's voice cut through the air like glass shattering, echoing against the mirrored walls of the rehearsal studio. Music had stopped mid-beat, the bass still humming faintly in the speakers as if confused by the sudden rupture. Jungkook stood motionless in the center, chest rising slowly, eyes locked onto Jimin's trembling figure. Sweat dripped down his temple, catching the fluorescent light, but he didn't move to wipe it away. "What are you talking about?" Jungkook asked, his voice low, dangerously calm. Jimin let out a hollow laugh, one that didn't belong to amusement, but to exhaustion, weeks, maybe months of something buried too deep finally clawing its way to the surface. "Don't do that," Jimin said, stepping forward. "Don't look at me like I'm crazy." The others lingered at the edges of the room, unsure whether to intervene or disappear. No one spoke. Even the air felt heavier, like it was pressing down on their lungs. Jungkook's fingers curled slightly at his sides. "I'm not pretending anything," he replied. "If you have something to say, just say it." Jimin's jaw tightened. For a second, it looked like he might back down, like the weight of whatever he was carrying might pull him under before he could release it. But then something shifted in his eyes, fear, yes, but also defiance. "You left me," Jimin said. Silence. Not confusion, not denial, just silence. Jungkook blinked, slow and deliberate. "I didn't go anywhere." "Not like that," Jimin snapped, his voice cracking. "You left me there, you promised you wouldn't, and you still did." The words hung in the air, incomplete, and yet unbearably heavy. Jungkook shook his head, a frown forming. "I don't know what you're talking about." Jimin took another step closer, too close now, close enough that Jungkook could see the slight tremor in his hands, the way his breathing faltered between words. "You don't remember the night it rained," Jimin whispered. "The car, the argument, the way you looked at me before you walked away." A flicker, just a flicker, crossed Jungkook's face. And Jimin saw it. "You do," Jimin breathed, his voice breaking. "You do remember." Jungkook's gaze dropped for a fraction of a second before hardening again. "You're mixing things up." "No," Jimin shook his head violently. "No, I'm not. I've replayed it 1,000 times, every second, every word." His voice softened then, almost pleading. "You said you'd come back." Jungkook's lips parted, but no words came out. The others exchanged glances, unease rippling through the room. This wasn't just an argument. This was something older, deeper, something that had been hidden too well for too long. Jimin's shoulders sagged slightly, like the anger had drained out of him, leaving only raw vulnerability. "I waited," he continued. "I waited until morning, and then longer. I thought maybe you got lost, or something happened, or," he swallowed hard, "or you changed your mind." Jungkook finally spoke, but his voice was quieter now. "Jimin, I never left you anywhere." The denial wasn't sharp this time, it was uncertain. And that uncertainty cracked something open. Jimin laughed again, but tears slipped down his cheeks now. "You're still doing it. You're still acting like it didn't happen." He wiped his face angrily. "Do you know what that does to someone, to be the only one who remembers something that changed everything?" Jungkook stared at him, and for the first time, doubt crept into his expression. Fragments, that was what it felt like. A flash of headlights, rain hitting glass, the sound of his own voice raised in anger, a door slamming. His chest tightened. Jungkook hesitated, pressing a hand against his temple. "I don't." "You said it didn't matter," Jimin cut in, his voice suddenly steady. "You said I didn't matter." The words landed like a punch. Jungkook's breath hitched. "I would never say that," he said, but the conviction wasn't there. Jimin held his gaze. "You did." The room felt smaller now, suffocating. Jungkook took a step back, shaking his head, as if trying to physically dislodge the images forming in his mind. No, that's not. But it was. The memory didn't come back all at once. It seeped in, slow and relentless. The rain. The fight. Jimin's voice, desperate and hurt. And his own, cold, distant, cruel. He remembered the moment now, the exact moment. The look on Jimin's face when he said those words. Jungkook's knees felt weak. His voice cracked. I didn't know you were still there. Jimin's expression went still. What? Jungkook swallowed hard, forcing the words out. I thought you left first. The confusion that followed was immediate, sharp. I never left, Jimin said, almost inaudible. I waited, Jungkook whispered. For you, you walked away and I thought, he shook his head. I thought you were done. Jimin stared at him, disbelief flooding his features. No, he said, you're wrong, you walked away. You told me to stay and then you. They both stopped. The realization crept in slowly, like a shadow stretching across the floor. Neither of them had left. Not at first. They had both waited. In different places. In the same storm. Misunderstanding layered over pride, over fear, over words said in anger that neither of them truly meant. Jimin's lips parted, but no sound came out. Jungkook took a shaky breath. I thought you chose to leave me. Jimin shook his head, tears falling freely now. I thought you abandoned me. The truth settled between them, heavy and irreversible. All that pain, all that distance, built on a moment neither of them had fully understood. Jungkook stepped forward this time slowly, like approaching something fragile that might break if touched too quickly. I didn't come back because I thought you didn't want me to, he said. Jimin let out a broken laugh. I didn't move because I thought you would. Their eyes met, and for the first time since the shouting began, there was no anger. Only regret. Only the unbearable weight of lost time. Jungkook exhaled shakily. If I had known. Jimin shook his head. If I had just followed you. The room felt different now, quieter, softer but heavier in a way that pressed against the heart instead of the lungs. Jungkook's voice dropped to a whisper. I'm sorry. Jimin closed his eyes, the words hitting deeper than the shout that had started everything. For a moment, neither of them moved. And then slowly, Jimin stepped closer. Not all the way, but closer than before. Say it again, he murmured. Jungkook looked at him, really looked this time, not past him, not through him, but at him. I'm sorry, he said again, stronger now, for leaving, for the words I said, for not coming back. Jimin nodded once, swallowing hard. It didn't fix everything. It didn't erase the years of silence, the nights spent wondering, the quiet resentment that had grown in the space between them. But it was a beginning. And sometimes, a beginning was the hardest part. The music system clicked back to life, the unfinished track resuming softly in the background, as if the world had decided it was time to keep moving. But neither of them did. Not yet. Because for the first time, they were exactly where they were supposed to be. Facing each other. And finally, understanding. You think 2 apologies fix years of silence? Jimin's voice cut through the fragile calm that had just begun to settle, sharper now, steadier, but laced with something far more dangerous than anger. Jungkook froze mid-step. The distance between them, which had just started to close, suddenly felt wider than ever. I didn't say that, Jungkook replied, his tone tightening. I know it doesn't fix everything. Then what does? Jimin shot back immediately, his eyes flashing. Because I'd really like to know, Jungkook, what exactly is supposed to fix the part where you disappeared from my life like I meant nothing. I didn't disappear. Jungkook's voice rose this time, echoing against the walls again. I was there, you just. I just what? Jimin challenged, stepping closer again, his presence almost overwhelming. Say it, go on. Jungkook clenched his jaw. You shut me out. A bitter laugh escaped Jimin. That's rich. It's true, Jungkook insisted, his voice trembling now, not with fear, but with something deeper, something raw. After that night, every time I tried to talk to you, you looked at me like I was a stranger, like I'd already left, even when I was standing right in front of you. Because you did leave, Jimin snapped, maybe not physically at first. But you checked out, you stopped trying, you stopped explaining, you just vanished piece by piece. The words hit harder than either of them expected. Jungkook inhaled sharply, his hands balling into fists. Do you even hear yourself? I was trying to respect your space. You made it clear you didn't want me around. I never said that. You didn't have to. Jungkook's voice cracked, frustration spilling over. The silence said everything. The room seemed to shrink again, the tension coiling tighter with every word. Jimin shook his head, packing now, running a hand through his hair. You always do that. You assume. You decide what I feel without actually asking me. And you, Jungkook fired back. You expect me to read your mind. You think I knew you were waiting, that you were hurting like that. I was obvious. No, you were. Jungkook stepped forward, matching Jimin's intensity. You were confusing. 1 second you looked like you wanted me there, the next you wouldn't even meet my eyes. Jimin stopped packing, turning sharply, because I was scared. The confession hit the room like a thunderclap. Jungkook blinked. Of what? Of you, Jimin said, his voice dropping, but the weight behind it didn't lessen. Of losing you again. Jungkook's expression faltered. That night, Jimin continued, slower now, as if each word had to be forced out. You said things I didn't think you were capable of saying. It felt like I didn't know you at all. Jungkook's gaze dropped. I thought if I got too close again, Jimin went on, you'd just walk away another time, and I wouldn't survive that twice. The anger in his voice was gone now, replaced by something far more fragile. Jungkook swallowed hard, the weight of those words pressing down on him. I didn't realize it hurt you that much, he admitted quietly. Jimin let out a hollow laugh. That's the problem, Jungkook, you didn't realize anything. Silence followed, thick and suffocating. The others in the room had long since stopped pretending to rehearse. No one moved, no one spoke. They were witnessing something too personal, too raw to interrupt. Jungkook finally looked up again, his eyes darker now. Then tell me, he said, tell me everything I didn't realize. Jimin hesitated. For a moment, it seemed like he might retreat again, pull back into himself like he had so many times before. But then he exhaled slowly. You stopped looking at me the same way, he said. After that night, even before we stopped talking completely, something changed. Jungkook frowned. That's not true. It is, Jimin insisted. You used to look at me like I mattered, like I was, he trailed off, searching for the word. Important. You are important, Jungkook said immediately. Then why did it feel like I was? Jimin shot back. Jungkook opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Because he didn't have an answer. Jimin's gaze softened slightly, but the hurt was still there, raw and unhealed. You started avoiding me, choosing anything else over being in the same room as me. Do you know what that does to someone? I thought giving you space was the right thing, Jungkook said, his voice quieter now. And I thought you were pushing me away, Jimin replied. They stared at each other again, the same realization from before resurfacing, but this time it cut deeper. This wasn't just one misunderstanding. It was a series of them, a chain reaction of silence, fear, and assumptions that had slowly torn them apart. Jungkook ran a hand over his face, frustration evident. We're idiots. Jimin let out a soft, humorless laugh. That's one way to put it. Another silence fell, but this one was different, less explosive, more reflective. But it didn't last. Is that it then? Jimin asked suddenly. We just acknowledge it and move on. Jungkook looked at him, confused. What do you mean? I mean, Jimin said, his voice tightening again, do we just pretend everything's fine now? Go back to how things were? Jungkook hesitated. And that hesitation was all it took. Jimin's expression hardened. Wow. That's not what I... You don't even know, do you? Jimin interrupted, shaking his head. You don't even know if you want to fix this. I do, Jungkook stepped forward quickly. Of course I do. Then why are you hesitating? Because it's not that simple. Jungkook's voice rose again. We can't just snap our fingers and erase everything that happened. I'm not asking you to erase it, Jimin shot back. I'm asking you to fight for it. The words hung heavy in the air. Jungkook stared at him, stunned. I've been the only one holding on to this for so long, Jimin continued, his voice trembling again. The only one who thought maybe there was still something worth saving. Jungkook's chest tightened. There is. Then prove it, Jimin said immediately. The challenge was clear. And for the first time, Jungkook didn't look away. How, he asked. Jimin stepped closer, their distance closing once more, but this time it wasn't filled with anger. It was filled with expectation. Stop running, Jimin said. Stop assuming, stop deciding for me what I feel. Jungkook nodded slowly. And, he prompted. And Jimin hesitated, then met his gaze fully. Be honest, even if it hurts. Jungkook let out a slow breath. Okay, he said. Jimin studied him, searching for any sign of doubt, of hesitation. Okay, he repeated. Okay, Jungkook confirmed, more firmly this time. Another silence settled, but this one felt different again. Uncertain. Unsteady. But real. Jimin nodded once, as if accepting something unspoken. Then let's start with this, he said. Jungkook waited. Jimin's expression shifted, something deeper surfacing, something he had been holding back even through all the shouting. Why did you say it? Jimin asked quietly, that night. Jungkook's breath caught. You know what I'm talking about, Jimin added. The memory hit harder this time. Clearer. Sharper. Jungkook looked away briefly before forcing himself to meet Jimin's eyes again. Because I was scared too, he admitted. Jimin frowned slightly. Of what? Jungkook hesitated, but only for a second. Of how much you mattered to me. The words landed softly, but their impact was anything but. Jimin's eyes widened, the tension in his body going completely still. Jungkook swallowed, his voice quieter now but steady. I thought, if I pushed you away first, it wouldn't hurt as much if you left. Jimin didn't respond. Didn't move. Didn't even breathe, it seemed. I didn't mean what I said, Jungkook continued, not a single word of it. The silence stretched. And then, Jimin laughed. But this time, it wasn't bitter. It was disbelieving. You're unbelievable, he murmured. Jungkook blinked. What? All this time, Jimin said, shaking his head slowly, we've been destroying each other over something neither of us actually meant. Jungkook let out a quiet, almost broken chuckle. Yeah. Jimin looked at him for a long moment. Then, softer now, almost to himself. You really are an idiot. Jungkook huffed a small laugh. Takes one to know one. And just like that, something shifted again. Not fixed. Not healed. But lighter. Jimin exhaled slowly, some of the tension finally leaving his shoulders. We've wasted enough time, he said. Jungkook nodded. Yes, he agreed, we have. And for the first time in a long time, neither of them looked like they were about to walk away. You're lying. The word came out sharp, almost instinctive, like Jimin hadn't even meant to say it out loud, but once it was there, it couldn't be taken back. Jungkook's expression fell. What? He asked, his voice low, almost disbelieving. Jimin didn't look away. You heard me. A flicker of frustration ignited behind Jungkook's eyes. After everything we just said, after all that, you think I'm lying? I think, Jimin replied slowly, his tone measured but cutting, that you're telling the version of the truth that hurts you the least. The air tightened again. Whatever fragile understanding they had begun to build cracking under the weight of suspicion. Jungkook let out a dry laugh, dragging a hand through his damp hair. That's not fair. Fair, Jimin echoed, stepping closer again. You want to talk about fair now? I'm trying to be honest with you, Jungkook shot back, his voice rising. For the first time in a long time, I'm not holding anything back. Then answer me this, Jimin said immediately, his eyes narrowing. If I mattered that much to you, why did you move on so easily? The question hit harder than anything else. Jungkook froze. Move on, he repeated quietly. Yes, Jimin said, and now there was no hiding the bitterness. Don't act like you don't know what I'm talking about. Jungkook's jaw tightened. You mean working, living my life? Not collapsing completely. I mean, Jimin interrupted, his voice trembling again but refusing to break, how you looked perfectly fine without me. Something in Jungkook snapped. You think I was fine? He demanded, stepping forward, his voice echoing sharply. You think I didn't feel anything? You didn't show it. Because I didn't have the luxury to. Jungkook's voice cracked, raw and unfiltered now. Someone had to keep going, someone had to act like things weren't falling apart. Jimin flinched just slightly, but Jungkook noticed. And you think that was easy? Jungkook continued, his breathing uneven. You think I wanted to wake up every day pretending I wasn't thinking about you? Jimin's gaze wavered for the first time. But you were laughing, Jimin said, quieter now. You were joking around, performing, acting like nothing had changed. Jungkook let out a hollow laugh. Yeah, that's what I do, that's what we all do. No, Jimin shook his head. Not like that, not like you were completely unaffected. Jungkook stared at him, something unreadable in his eyes. You really believe that? He asked softly. Jimin hesitated. And that hesitation said everything. Jungkook exhaled slowly, the anger draining out of him, replaced by something heavier. You never came to me, he said, not once. Jimin blinked. What? You never asked me how I was, Jungkook continued. You never gave me the chance to show you that I wasn't okay. Jimin's lips parted, but no words came out. You decided I was fine, Jungkook added, just like I decided you didn't want me around. The realization hit again, familiar but no less painful. Jimin looked away this time, his shoulders tightening. I thought if I asked, it would make everything worse. Jungkook frowned. How? Because then it would be real, Jimin admitted. Then I'd have to hear you say it out loud that you were better off without me. Jungkook's eyes widened slightly. I was never better off without you. Jimin laughed softly, shaking his head. You say that now. I would have said it then, Jungkook insisted. No, you wouldn't have, Jimin replied immediately, because you didn't. Silence. A heavy, uncomfortable silence. Jungkook opened his mouth to argue, but the words didn't come. Because Jimin wasn't entirely wrong. Jimin stepped back slightly, putting just enough distance between them to breathe. There's something else, he said. Jungkook's chest tightened. What? Jimin hesitated, then looked up again, his expression guarded. I heard things, he said. Jungkook frowned. What things? Jimin's gaze hardened. About you. Jungkook's stomach dropped. From who? It doesn't matter, Jimin said quickly. It does to me, Jungkook insisted. Jimin shook his head. People talk, Jungkook, you know that. What did they say? Jungkook pressed. Jimin hesitated again, but this time it was different. He looked almost reluctant, like he didn't want to say it, but couldn't keep it in anymore. They said you were relieved, Jimin said finally. that after everything you seemed lighter. Jungkook stared at him, disbelief flooding his expression. That's ridiculous. They said you didn't mention me anymore, Jimin continued, his voice tightening, that it was like I never existed. That's not true, Jungkook snapped, his frustration flaring again. I just stopped talking about it because it hurt too much. But how was I supposed to know that? Jimin shot back. All I saw was you moving forward like nothing happened. Jungkook ran a hand over his face, exasperated. So instead of asking me, you just believed them. I didn't want to believe them, Jimin said, his voice breaking slightly, but it matched what I was seeing. Jungkook shook his head, packing now. Unbelievable. What is? Jimin challenged. That you trust rumors more than me, Jungkook replied, stopping abruptly to face him. After everything we've been through. I trusted what made sense at the time, Jimin argued. It didn't make sense, Jungkook's voice rose again. You know me better than that. Do I? Jimin asked suddenly. The question cut deeper than any accusation. Jungkook went still. Jimin's eyes softened, but only slightly, because right now I'm not so sure. The words lingered, heavy and unsettling. Jungkook swallowed hard, then let me show you. Jimin frowned, show me what? That you do know me, Jungkook said, that you were right about me all along. Jimin studied him carefully, searching for any sign of uncertainty, but Jungkook's gaze didn't waver this time. And how are you planning to do that? Jimin asked. Jungkook hesitated for a brief moment. Then he spoke, quieter now, but every word carried weight. By telling you something I've never told anyone. Jimin's expression shifted, curiosity and caution mixing together. What is it? He asked. Jungkook looked around briefly, as if suddenly aware of the others still lingering in the room. Not here, he said. Jimin followed his gaze, then nodded slowly. Fine. The tension hadn't disappeared. If anything, it had transformed, less explosive but more dangerous, more unpredictable. Because now there was something else in the air. Something unknown. Jungkook took a step back, grabbing his jacket without breaking eye contact. Come with me. Jimin hesitated for only a second before following. The others watched silently as they walked out, the door closing behind them with a soft but final click. The hallway outside was quieter, dimly lit, the distant hum of the building wrapping around them. Jimin crossed his arms. Start talking. Jungkook exhaled slowly, leaning back against the wall for a moment before looking at him again. You asked why I said those things that night, he began. Jimin nodded. Yeah. Jungkook's gaze darkened slightly. There's more to it than just fear. Jimin's chest tightened. What do you mean? Jungkook hesitated. And for the first time since they left the room, he looked nervous. I wasn't just scared of losing you, he admitted. Jimin frowned. Then what were you scared of? Jungkook met his eyes again. Of what would happen if I didn't. Jimin blinked, confusion flashing across his face. That doesn't make any sense. Jungkook let out a quiet, humorless laugh. Yeah, it didn't to me either, not at the time. Then explain it, Jimin said, his voice firm. Jungkook hesitated again, but only for a second. Then he pushed himself off the wall, stepping closer. That night, he said slowly, someone else was there. Jimin's breath caught. What? Jungkook's expression hardened, something darker surfacing beneath the vulnerability. I wasn't the only one who heard what we said, he continued. Jimin stared at him, the tension snapping back into place. Who? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Jungkook held his gaze. And when he finally answered, everything shifted. It wasn't just a misunderstanding, Jimin. His voice dropped. There were consequences. Consequences. Jimin's voice came out sharper than he intended, cutting through the dim hallway like a blade. His chest rose and fell unevenly, the word echoing in his head as if it carried something far heavier than Jungkook had said out loud. What consequences, Jungkook? He pressed, stepping closer. Stop speaking in riddles. Jungkook didn't answer immediately. His gaze dropped to the floor for a moment, jaw tightening as if he was debating whether to go further or to turn back entirely. Say it, Jimin demanded, his patience snapping. You don't get to drag me this far and then hesitate. Jungkook exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair before finally meeting Jimin's eyes again. That night wasn't just about us, he said quietly. Jimin frowned. Then what was it about? Jungkook hesitated. And that hesitation made Jimin's stomach twist. Jungkook. I heard something before you got there, Jungkook said suddenly, his words coming faster now, like he'd forced open a door he could no longer close. Before the argument, before everything. Jimin blinked. Heard what? People talking, Jungkook replied. About us. The air shifted. Jimin's expression hardened instantly. What do you mean, about us? Jungkook let out a bitter laugh, exactly what it sounds like. Jimin shook his head. No, be specific. Jungkook looked away briefly before continuing. They were saying things, making assumptions, about why we were always together, about what it meant. Jimin's chest tightened, a familiar, uncomfortable feeling creeping in. And he pushed, people always talk, why would that matter enough to? Because it wasn't just talk, Jungkook interrupted, his voice sharper now. It wasn't harmless gossip. Jimin went still. What are you saying? Jungkook's eyes darkened. They were planning to use it. A chill ran down Jimin's spine. Use it how? Jungkook swallowed hard. To control us, to manipulate things, to create a narrative that would benefit them. Jimin stared at him, disbelief flashing across his face. That sounds insane. I know, Jungkook said. That's what I thought too, at first. Then why are you telling me this like it's real? Jimin demanded. Because it is, Jungkook replied firmly. Silence fell between them, thick and suffocating. Jimin shook his head slowly, trying to process. So let me get this straight. You're saying someone overheard us, twisted it, and somehow that led to you saying those things to me. Jungkook clenched his jaw. It's not that simple. Then make it simple, Jimin snapped. Because right now, it sounds like you're trying to justify hurting me with some conspiracy I've never even heard about. Jungkook flinched at the word justify. I'm not justifying it, he said, his voice lower now. I'm explaining it. Then explain better, Jimin shot back. Jungkook took a step forward, his frustration finally breaking through again. I heard them say they were going to expose everything, twist it into something ugly, something that would ruin you. Jimin froze. Ruin me, he repeated. Yes, Jungkook said, his voice tightening. Not just you, all of us, but you were the easiest target. Jimin's expression darkened. Why me? Jungkook hesitated. Why me, Jungkook? Jimin pressed, his voice rising. Because you care too much, Jungkook said finally. Because you don't hide it well, because you feel everything openly. The words hit hard. Jimin let out a short, bitter laugh. So my personality is a weakness now. In their eyes, yes, Jungkook replied, and in that moment I panicked. Jimin stared at him. So you decided to hurt me first before anyone else could. Jungkook's silence was answer enough. Jimin stepped back, disbelief written all over his face. That's your explanation. I thought if I created distance, Jungkook said quickly, if I made it look like there was nothing between us, nothing worth talking about, then they wouldn't have anything to use. Jimin shook his head, anger bubbling up again. So you humiliated me, you said things you knew would break me, all to protect me. Yes, Jungkook said, his voice firm despite the pain in his eyes. Jimin let out a hollow laugh, running a hand over his face. That's unbelievable. It was the only thing I could think of, Jungkook insisted. I didn't have time to plan. I didn't know how serious they were. I just knew I had to shut it down. So you shut me down, Jimin said quietly. Jungkook didn't deny it. The silence that followed was suffocating. Jimin's breathing slowed, but the tension in his body didn't ease. If anything, it grew heavier, more complicated. You should have told me, Jimin said after a long moment. I couldn't, Jungkook replied immediately. Why not? Because if you knew, Jungkook said, his voice dropping, you would have reacted. And if you reacted, it would have confirmed everything they were saying. Jimin's eyes flashed. So you decided I wasn't strong enough to handle it. That's not what I'm saying. That's exactly what you're saying. Jimin's voice echoed again, louder now. You made that decision for me without even giving me a choice. Jungkook stepped closer, his own frustration rising again. I was trying to protect you. I didn't need that kind of protection, Jimin shot back. Do you have any idea what it felt like to hear those words from you, to think that was how you really saw me? Jungkook's expression twisted with guilt. I know I hurt you. No, you don't, Jimin said, shaking his head. Because if you did, you wouldn't be standing here acting like it was some necessary sacrifice. I'm not acting like that, Jungkook argued. You are, Jimin insisted. You're standing there telling me it had to happen like there was no other way. Jungkook fell silent, and that silence said everything again. Jimin laughed bitterly. Wow. I didn't know what else to do, Jungkook said quietly. You could have trusted me, Jimin replied just as quietly, but the words carried more weight than any shout. Jungkook looked at him, something breaking in his expression. I was scared, he admitted. Jimin's gaze softened for a fraction of a second, but the hurt didn't fade. So was I, Jimin said. The hallway felt colder now, the dim lights casting long shadows that stretched between them. Jungkook swallowed hard. After that night, I kept an eye on things. I made sure nothing got out. Jimin frowned. What do you mean? I watched them, Jungkook said, listened, made sure they didn't follow through. Jimin's eyes narrowed, and Jungkook hesitated. And what? Jimin pressed. They didn't, Jungkook said finally, at least not the way they planned. Jimin crossed his arms. That's not reassuring. Jungkook nodded slightly. I know. Another silence. Then Jimin spoke again, slower this time, more deliberate. Who was it? Jungkook looked at him. Jimin. No, Jimin cut in firmly. You don't get to hide that part, not anymore. If this affected both of us, I deserve to know. Jungkook's jaw tightened. You're right, he said after a moment. Jimin waited, his heart pounding harder with every second. Jungkook took a breath. It was someone close, he said. Jimin's stomach dropped. How close? Jungkook's gaze didn't waver this time. Close enough to hear everything, he said. The implication hit immediately. Jimin's expression shifted from confusion to something darker. No, he said quietly, no, that's not possible. Jungkook didn't respond. Tell me I'm wrong, Jimin demanded, his voice rising again. Tell me I'm overthinking this. Jungkook stayed silent. And that silence confirmed everything. Jimin took a step back, his mind racing, piecing things together in ways he didn't want to. There weren't many people there that night, he said slowly, just us, and... He stopped, because the realization hit hard. His eyes widened slightly, disbelief flooding his features. You're kidding, he whispered. Jungkook closed his eyes briefly, like he couldn't bear to see Jimin's reaction. Jungkook, Jimin said, his voice trembling now, not with anger, but with something far worse. Say it. Jungkook opened his eyes again. And when he spoke, his voice was steady, but heavy. You know who it is. Jimin shook his head immediately. No, I don't want to guess. I want to hear you say it. Jungkook hesitated. But there was no turning back now. It was someone we trusted, he said. Jimin's chest tightened painfully. Someone who knew us both, Jungkook continued. Someone who saw everything up close. Jimin's hands trembled slightly at his sides. Someone, Jungkook finished, his voice dropping to almost a whisper, who knew exactly how to hurt us. The hallway fell into complete silence. And this time, it wasn't just heavy. It was suffocating. Because the truth wasn't just painful. It was personal. You're going to say it, Jimin demanded, his voice trembling but unyielding. Right now. Jungkook didn't move. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating, until Jimin let out a sharp, frustrated breath and stepped even closer, his eyes burning. Don't protect them, Jimin said, his voice dropping into something colder. You already protected them once. Look where that got us. Jungkook's jaw tightened. It's not about protecting them. Then what is it about? Jimin shot back. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're still choosing them over me. That hit. Jungkook's head snapped up, eyes flashing. That's not fair. Fair? Jimin let out a hollow laugh. You lost the right to talk about fair the moment you decided I wasn't worth the truth. Jungkook took a step forward, his frustration breaking through again. I was trying to stop things from getting worse. And instead, you made them worse, Jimin fired back immediately. Congratulations. The sarcasm cut deep, but Jungkook didn't retreat this time. I didn't know it would spiral like that, he said, his voice rough. I thought if I shut it down quickly, it would disappear. Well, it didn't, Jimin said sharply. It destroyed everything. The words echoed between them. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Jimin exhaled slowly, his voice quieter now, but more dangerous because of it. Who was it, Jungkook? Jungkook closed his eyes briefly, as if bracing himself. You already know, he murmured. I want to hear you say it. Jungkook opened his eyes again, and this time there was no hesitation left. It was someone from our own circle, he said. Someone who had access to everything, our schedules, our conversations, our dynamics. Jimin's chest tightened painfully. Stop circling it, he snapped. Say their name. Jungkook swallowed hard. It was someone who stayed quiet that night, he continued instead. Someone who watched. Jimin's mind raced, replaying every detail of that night, every face, every movement. Rain. Voices. Tension. And then, a figure in the distance, someone who had lingered longer than they should have. Jimin's breath hitched. No, he whispered, that's not possible. Jungkook didn't deny it. Jimin shook his head, backing away slightly as the realization began to solidify into something real, something unbearable. They wouldn't do that, Jimin said, more to himself than to Jungkook. Not to us. They would, Jungkook replied quietly, and they almost did. Jimin's eyes snapped back to him, almost. Jungkook nodded. I stopped it before it got out of control. How? Jimin demanded. Jungkook hesitated again, but only briefly. I confronted them, he admitted. Jimin blinked, caught off guard. When? A few days after that night, Jungkook said, when I realized they hadn't dropped it. And you didn't think to tell me? Jimin's voice rose again, incredulous. I couldn't risk dragging you into it, Jungkook replied, not when I wasn't sure how far they were willing to go. Jimin let out a bitter laugh. So instead, you let me believe you hated me. Jungkook flinched. I never hated you. But you made it look like you did, Jimin shot back. You made it convincing. Jungkook's silence was heavy with guilt. Jimin shook his head, packing now, his thoughts spiraling. This doesn't make sense. None of it makes sense. It does, Jungkook said softly. You just don't want it to. Jimin stopped abruptly, turning to face him again. You're right, I don't want to, because the alternative is that someone we trusted betrayed us for their own gain. Jungkook didn't argue. And I don't know which is worse, Jimin continued, his voice trembling now, that betrayal or the fact that you chose to handle it alone. Jungkook stepped closer, his expression softening despite the tension. I didn't want you to get hurt any more than you already were. Jimin let out a shaky breath. You don't get to decide that for me. I know, Jungkook said quietly. I know that now. Another silence fell. But this one wasn't explosive. It was heavy, with everything left unsaid. Jimin looked away, his voice quieter when he spoke again. What did they say when you confronted them? Jungkook hesitated. Jungkook. They didn't deny it, Jungkook admitted. Jimin's stomach dropped. They said it was an opportunity, Jungkook continued, his voice darkening. That people were already talking, and all they had to do was push the narrative a little further. Jimin clenched his fists. That's disgusting. Jungkook nodded. I know. And you just, what, threatened them into silence? Jimin asked. Something like that, Jungkook replied. Jimin frowned. Something like that. Jungkook met his gaze. I made it clear that if they went through with it, I wouldn't stay quiet. Jimin blinked. What does that mean? It means I had leverage too, Jungkook said. The tension shifted again. What kind of leverage? Jimin asked slowly. Jungkook hesitated. And that hesitation made Jimin's heart race. What did you do, Jungkook? Jungkook looked away this time, his expression tightening. I found out things about them, he said, things they wouldn't want exposed. Jimin stared at him. You blackmailed them? He asked, disbelief creeping into his voice. Jungkook didn't answer immediately. Jungkook, Jimin repeated, sharper now. I did what I had to do, Jungkook said finally. The words hung in the air, heavy and unsettling. Jimin took a step back, his expression shifting from shock to something more complicated. You crossed a line, he said. Jungkook's gaze hardened slightly. So did they. That doesn't make it right. It made it effective, Jungkook replied. Jimin shook his head, running a hand through his hair. I don't even recognize you right now. Jungkook's expression flickered with something, hurt, maybe, but it was quickly replaced by something steadier. I did it for us, he said. Don't, Jimin snapped. Don't say that like it excuses everything. I'm not saying it excuses it, Jungkook replied. I'm saying it's the reason. Jimin let out a frustrated breath, packing again. You think I wanted you to do that, to carry all of this alone, to turn into someone who protects what matters, Jungkook interrupted. Who shuts people out, Jimin corrected sharply, who decides things without asking. Jungkook fell silent. Jimin stopped packing, turning back to him, his expression conflicted. You should have trusted me, he said again, softer this time. Jungkook nodded slowly. I know. And now, Jimin asked, what happens now? Jungkook hesitated. We deal with it, he said. Jimin frowned. Deal with what? You said you already handled it. I handled it back then, Jungkook replied, but things don't just disappear like that. Jimin's chest tightened. What are you saying? Jungkook met his eyes, his expression serious. I'm saying it's not over. The words sent a chill down Jimin's spine. What do you mean it's not over? He demanded. Jungkook took a slow breath. I mean they didn't forget, he said, and neither did I. Jimin stared at him, unease creeping in. Jungkook. Jungkook's gaze darkened slightly. I think they're still watching, he said. The hallway suddenly felt colder. Quieter. Like something unseen had just shifted around them. Jimin's heart pounded harder in his chest as he looked around instinctively, as if expecting someone to be there. But the hallway was empty. Or at least, it looked empty. Jimin turned back to Jungkook, his voice barely above a whisper. Then we don't stay quiet anymore. Jungkook studied him carefully. Are you sure? He asked. Jimin didn't hesitate this time. No, he admitted. Then his expression hardened, determination replacing fear. But I'm done being in the dark. Jungkook nodded slowly. And for the first time since this all began, they weren't standing on opposite sides of the conflict. They were standing on the same side of something far more dangerous. Together. Then we start now. Jimin's voice was steady, but the tension in his body betrayed him. His hands were clenched at his sides, his shoulders tight, his eyes scanning the hallway like he expected the walls themselves to respond. Jungkook watched him carefully. You don't even know what you're stepping into, Jungkook said quietly. Jimin let out a short breath, almost a scoff. I've been in it this whole time. The only difference now is that I'm not blind anymore. That's exactly what makes it dangerous, Jungkook replied. Jimin turned to him sharply. Stop doing that. Doing what? Talking like I'm fragile, Jimin snapped. Like I can't handle this. Jungkook's expression shifted. That's not what I'm saying. It is, Jimin insisted. You keep deciding what I can and can't take, and I'm done with that. Jungkook exhaled slowly, trying to keep his composure. I'm trying to keep you safe. And I'm trying to be treated like I matter enough to know the truth, Jimin shot back. The words hit harder than anything else. Jungkook's gaze softened slightly, but the tension didn't fade. You do matter, he said. That's why I'm worried. Jimin shook his head, frustration simmering. Then trust me to stand beside you instead of behind you. Silence lingered between them, thick, but no longer suffocating, more like something waiting to break open. Jungkook finally nodded once, slowly. Fine, he said, then you should know everything. Jimin's chest tightened, but he didn't look away. Good. Jungkook glanced down the hallway again, his instincts sharp, his awareness heightened like he was expecting something to shift at any moment. They didn't just overhear us that night, Jungkook said. They'd been watching for a while. Jimin frowned, watching how? Patterns, Jungkook replied. Where we sat, how we interacted, how often we ended up in the same place without meaning to. Jimin's stomach turned. That's creepy. Jungkook gave a humorless smile. It gets worse. Jimin folded his arms, bracing himself. Go on. They started asking questions, Jungkook continued. Subtle ones at first, testing reactions, seeing who would slip. Jimin's eyes narrowed. Did anyone? Jungkook hesitated. That's not a good sign, Jimin muttered. There were moments, Jungkook admitted, nothing obvious, but enough to keep them interested. Jimin exhaled slowly, processing. So they built a story. Exactly, Jungkook said, and once they had enough pieces, they were ready to push it. Jimin's jaw tightened, and that's when you panicked. Jungkook nodded once. That's when I said those things. Jimin looked away briefly, the memory flashing again, sharp. Painful, still too vivid. You could have told me, he said quietly. I know, Jungkook replied, but at the time, I thought distance was the only way to make it stop. Jimin let out a soft, bitter breath. You were wrong. I know that too, Jungkook said. Silence settled again, but this time it wasn't filled with anger. It was filled with something heavier, understanding mixed with regret. Jimin looked back at him. So what changed? Jungkook frowned slightly. What do you mean? You said you confronted them, Jimin explained. You said you stopped it. What made you realize it wasn't over? Jungkook's expression darkened. Because they didn't look scared, he said. Jimin's chest tightened. What? When I confronted them, Jungkook continued, his voice low, controlled, they didn't panic. They didn't back down the way I expected. Jimin frowned. Then what did they do? They smiled, Jungkook said. The words sent a chill through the air. Jimin's voice dropped. That's not normal. No, Jungkook agreed. It's not. Why would they smile if you had leverage? Jimin asked. Jungkook hesitated. Jungkook. They said something, Jungkook admitted. Jimin stepped closer. What did they say? Jungkook's gaze met his, something unsettled flickering beneath the surface. They said, I was already too late. Jimin's breath caught. Too late for what? He asked. Jungkook shook his head slightly. They didn't explain. That doesn't make any sense, Jimin said, frustration creeping back in. If they didn't expose anything, then what were they talking about? I don't know, Jungkook replied, but it didn't feel like a bluff. Jimin ran a hand through his hair, packing a few steps before stopping again. So either they were lying to mess with you, or they already did something, Jungkook finished. The words hung heavy. Jimin turned slowly, his expression tightening. What could they have done? Jungkook didn't answer immediately. Jungkook. They could have planted something, he said finally. A rumor, a story, something subtle enough to spread without being traced back to them. Jimin's stomach dropped. You think that's what happened? I think it's possible, Jungkook replied. Jimin let out a sharp breath, his mind racing. That would explain. He stopped. Jungkook frowned. Explain what? Jimin hesitated. Jimin. There were things, Jimin admitted slowly. Small things, comments, looks, moments where it felt like people knew something I didn't. Jungkook's expression tightened. Why didn't you say anything? Because I thought I was imagining it, Jimin said, or that it was just normal gossip. Jungkook shook his head. It wasn't normal. No, Jimin agreed quietly. It was. The realization settled between them, heavier than anything before. Jimin's voice dropped, so while we were busy misunderstanding each other, they were controlling the narrative, Jungkook finished. Jimin clenched his fist. That's infuriating, Jungkook offered. Disgusting, Jimin corrected, and we let it happen. Jungkook's jaw tightened. We didn't know. We should have, Jimin shot back. We should have trusted each other enough to talk. Jungkook didn't argue. Because Jimin was right. A long silence followed, both of them lost in the weight of it. Then Jimin spoke again, quieter now. Do you still have leverage on them? Jungkook looked at him, surprised by the question. Why? Because if they're still watching, Jimin said, his voice steadying again, then we can't just sit here and hope it goes away. Jungkook studied him carefully. What are you thinking? Jimin hesitated. Then his expression hardened. I think we stop reacting, he said, and start acting. Jungkook's eyes narrowed slightly. You want to confront them? I want the truth, Jimin replied. You might not like what you find, Jungkook warned. Jimin let out a quiet, almost bitter laugh. At this point, I doubt it can get worse. Jungkook didn't respond. And that silence said more than words ever could. Jimin noticed. What? He asked, his voice sharpening again. What aren't you telling me now? Jungkook hesitated. Jungkook. There's something else, he admitted. Jimin's chest tightened immediately. Of course there is. Jungkook ran a hand over his face, clearly frustrated with himself. I didn't want to bring it up yet, he said, not until I was sure. Sure of what? Jimin demanded. Jungkook looked at him, his expression serious. That it actually meant something. Jimin took a step closer. What did you find? Jungkook hesitated one last time. Then he spoke. After I confronted them, things went quiet for a while, he said, too quiet. Jimin frowned. That's not reassuring. No, Jungkook agreed. It is. Then what happened? Jungkook's gaze darkened slightly. I started noticing patterns again, he said, but not from them. Jimin's heart skipped. Then from who? Jungkook held his gaze. From you. The words hit like a sudden drop. Jimin blinked, confusion flashing across his face. What? Jungkook stepped closer, his voice lower now, more intense. You started acting differently, he said, saying things that didn't quite match, reacting to things before they happened. Jimin's chest tightened. That's not true. I thought so too, Jungkook replied, at first. Jimin shook his head, backing away slightly. You're not making sense. Jungkook's eyes didn't leave his. There were moments, he continued, where it felt like you knew something I didn't. Jimin's breathing became uneven. That's ridiculous. Is it? Jungkook asked quietly. Jimin's mind raced, searching for something, anything, to make sense of what he was hearing. I never. You told me once, Jungkook interrupted, that you felt like you were being watched even when you were alone. Jimin froze, because he remembered saying that. But he hadn't thought it meant anything. That was nothing, Jimin said quickly, just paranoia. Jungkook didn't look convinced. And the messages, he added. Jimin's stomach dropped. What messages? Jungkook's expression hardened. The ones you said you didn't remember sending. The hallway fell completely silent. And this time, it wasn't just tension. It was something else. Something far more unsettling. I never sent you anything. Jimin's voice came out too quickly, too sharp, like he was trying to cut the idea down before it could fully take shape. Jungkook didn't flinch. You did, he said quietly. Jimin shook his head, stepping back as if distance could make the accusation less real. No, you're wrong, I would remember. That's the problem, Jungkook replied. You don't. Silence crashed between them. Jimin's breathing turned uneven, his chest tightening as something cold crept into his veins. What messages? He demanded, but his voice had already lost some of its certainty. Jungkook studied him for a moment, as if trying to decide whether pushing further would break him. Late at night, Jungkook said slowly. Always late, short messages, vague, but specific enough to matter. Jimin frowned, his mind racing. Specific how? Jungkook hesitated. Jungkook, Jimin snapped, fear now bleeding into his frustration. Stop filtering, just say it. Jungkook exhaled. You warned me. Jimin froze. Warned you about what? About them, Jungkook replied. About things they were planning, things I hadn't even figured out yet. Jimin stared at him, disbelief flooding his expression. That's impossible. That's what I thought, Jungkook said, until it kept happening. Jimin shook his head, his voice rising again. No, this doesn't make sense. If I knew something like that, I wouldn't just send cryptic messages and then forget about it. I know, Jungkook said. That's why I didn't tell you. Jimin let out a sharp, disbelieving laugh. You're unbelievable. You think I wanted this to be true? Jungkook shot back, his voice finally breaking through its restraint. You think I wanted to believe that you were somehow involved without knowing it? Involved? Jimin echoed, his eyes widening. What are you implying? I'm not implying anything, Jungkook said quickly. I'm trying to understand it. By accusing me, Jimin snapped. I'm not accusing you, Jungkook insisted. I'm telling you what happened. Jimin ran a hand through his hair, packing now, his thoughts spiraling. No, this is insane. There has to be another explanation. Then give me one, Jungkook said. Jimin stopped. Because he couldn't. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. What did the messages say? Jimin asked finally, his voice quieter now but tense. Jungkook watched him carefully before answering. The first one said, don't trust what you hear tomorrow. Jimin's breath hitched. And the next day, he asked. There was a rumor. Jungkook said, something small but it spread fast, about us. Jimin clenched his fists. What kind of rumor? That we'd had a falling out because of something personal, Jungkook replied. Something more than just an argument. Jimin's stomach twisted. And you think I knew about that before it happened? You warned me, Jungkook repeated. Jimin shook his head again, more slowly this time. What else? Jungkook hesitated, then continued. Another message said, they're closer than you think. Jimin frowned. Closer who? I didn't know at the time, Jungkook said, but a few days later, I found out someone we trusted had been feeding information to others. Jimin's chest tightened painfully. So you're saying whoever sent those messages knew everything before it happened? Jungkook nodded. And you think that was me, Jimin said, his voice barely above a whisper. Jungkook didn't answer immediately. Jungkook, I think the messages came from your phone, Jungkook said carefully. Jimin stared at him. That's not the same thing, Jungkook added quickly. I don't think you sent them on purpose. Then what? Jimin demanded. Someone hacked me, controlled me. You hear how that sounds? I know how it sounds, Jungkook said, but it's the only thing that fits. Jimin let out a shaky breath, his mind racing faster now, trying to latch onto something real. I would have noticed, he said. If something was wrong, I would have noticed. Jungkook's gaze softened slightly. Would you? Jimin's eyes snapped to his. What's that supposed to mean? Jungkook hesitated, then spoke carefully. You said it yourself, he said. You felt like you were being watched. You said things didn't feel right sometimes. That doesn't mean. And there were gaps, Jungkook continued, his voice steady but intense. Moments where you couldn't remember small things, conversations, details. Jimin's breath caught. Because he remembered that too. But he had brushed it off, ignored it. I thought I was just tired, Jimin said quietly. Maybe you were, Jungkook replied, or maybe someone was taking advantage of that. The implication settled heavily between them. Jimin shook his head again, but this time it was weaker, less certain. No, he whispered, no, that's not possible. Jimin, Jungkook said softly, stepping closer, look at me. Jimin didn't want to. But he did. You're not the one who hurt me that night, Jungkook continued, but something else might have been using that moment. Jimin's chest tightened painfully. Stop. I'm not blaming you, Jungkook insisted. Stop, Jimin repeated, louder this time. Just stop talking for a second. Jungkook fell silent. Jimin turned away, pressing a hand against his forehead, trying to steady his breathing. This doesn't make sense, he muttered. It doesn't make sense. But deep down, something was shifting. Small pieces. Moments he couldn't explain. The feeling of unease when he was alone. The strange gaps in his memory. And now, the messages. Jimin let out a shaky breath, lowering his hand slowly. What if, he started, then stopped. Jungkook waited. Jimin turned back to him, his expression pale but determined. What if you're right? The question hung in the air, fragile and terrifying. Jungkook didn't look relieved. He looked worried. Then we have a bigger problem, he said. Jimin nodded slowly. Yeah, we do. Silence followed again, but this time it wasn't just tension. It was fear. Real, undeniable fear. Jimin swallowed hard. Do you still have the messages? Jungkook nodded. I never deleted them. Show me, Jimin said. Jungkook hesitated. Are you sure? No, Jimin admitted, but I need to see them. Jungkook pulled out his phone, his movements slow, deliberate. Jimin's heart pounded harder with every second. Jungkook unlocked the screen, scrolled briefly, then turned it toward him. Jimin stepped closer, his eyes scanning the screen. And then, he froze. Because the messages were there. Short. Simple. Exactly like Jungkook had described. But that wasn't what made his blood run cold. It was the way they were written. The tone. The phrasing. It was familiar. Too familiar. Jimin's lips parted slightly, his voice barely a whisper. That's how I text. Jungkook didn't say anything. Jimin's hands trembled slightly as he stared at the screen, his mind racing. But I didn't write this, he said quickly. I know I didn't. I believe you, Jungkook said. Jimin looked up at him, something desperate in his eyes. Then how is this possible? Jungkook shook his head slowly. I don't know. Jimin stepped back, his breathing uneven again. This means, he started, but couldn't finish. Jungkook's voice was quiet, but steady. It means someone was close enough to you to mimic you. Jimin's chest tightened painfully. Or Jungkook added, his tone darkening slightly, close enough to access your phone. The hallway suddenly felt suffocating. Jimin's mind raced through every possibility, every face, every moment he might have let his guard down. Someone close. Someone he trusted. Someone who knew him well enough to sound like him. Jimin's voice came out strained. Then it's not just about rumors anymore. Jungkook nodded slowly. No, he said, it's not. Jimin's gaze hardened, fear slowly giving way to something sharper. Determination. Then we find out who it is, he said. Jungkook studied him carefully, and if it's who we think it is. Jimin didn't hesitate this time. Then we stop them, he said. His voice was steady now. Unshaken. Because whatever fear had been there before, it was no longer enough to hold him back. Then we stop them. Jimin's voice didn't shake this time. It didn't waver, didn't crack, didn't carry the same hesitation it once had. It was steady, grounded in something new, something forged from everything they had just uncovered. Jungkook stared at him for a moment, searching his face for doubt. He didn't find any. That's not as simple as it sounds, Jungkook said quietly. Jimin let out a breath, his gaze hardening. Nothing about this has been simple, I'm not expecting it to be. Jungkook nodded slowly, slipping his phone back into his pocket. Then we need to be careful, whoever did this, they're not reckless. They're calculated, Jimin finished. Exactly. A heavy silence followed, but it wasn't empty. It was filled with the weight of realization, of strategy forming in real time. Jimin crossed his arms, leaning slightly against the wall as his mind raced. If they've been watching us this closely, then they're probably still doing it. Jungkook's eyes flicked down the hallway again, instinctively scanning. That's what I'm thinking. Jimin exhaled slowly, which means if we suddenly start acting differently, they'll notice. Jungkook nodded, and they'll adapt. Jimin's lips pressed into a thin line. Then we don't give them anything to adapt to. Jungkook frowned slightly. What are you suggesting? Jimin looked at him, something sharp and deliberate in his eyes. We act like nothing's changed. Jungkook blinked. You want us to pretend? I want us to use it, Jimin corrected. They think we are still in the dark. That gives us an advantage. Jungkook considered that, his expression tightening with thought. And what exactly are we looking for? Patterns, Jimin said immediately. Same as them, we watch who watches us. Jungkook let out a quiet breath, almost impressed despite the tension. You've thought about this fast. Jimin gave a faint, humorless smile. I've had a lot of time to think about things I didn't understand. Jungkook's gaze softened briefly, but then sharpened again. There's a risk. There's always a risk, Jimin replied. If they realize, we know. They won't, Jimin cut in firmly, because we won't give them a reason to think that. Jungkook studied him carefully, then nodded once. All right. The agreement settled between them, quiet but solid. Jimin straightened slightly, so we go back in there. Jungkook raised an eyebrow, like nothing happened. Jimin met his gaze. Can you do that? Jungkook hesitated for a fraction of a second. Then he nodded. I can. Jimin held his gaze for a moment longer. as if making sure he meant it. Then he turned toward the rehearsal room door. "Good," he said softly, "because if we slip even once, we lose whatever advantage we have." Jungkook followed him, his expression set. As Jimin's hand reached for the handle, he paused. "Jungkook," he said without turning. "Yes." Jimin's voice dropped slightly. "If this gets worse." Jungkook's chest tightened. "It will." Jimin nodded faintly, "Then don't shut me out again." Jungkook didn't hesitate this time. "I won't." Jimin opened the door. The music hit them immediately, the bass vibrating through the floor as if nothing had changed. But everything had. The others glanced up as they entered, their expressions shifting, curiosity, tension, something unspoken lingering in the air. Jimin didn't react. He walked in like he always did, calm, composed, unreadable. Jungkook followed, mirroring him perfectly. For a moment, everything felt almost normal. "Almost." "Are we continuing?" someone asked, breaking the silence. Jimin nodded, "Yeah." Jungkook moved back to his position, his movements smooth, controlled. The music restarted. And just like that, they slipped back into place. But this time, they were watching. Jimin kept his expression neutral, his body moving automatically with the choreography, but his eyes were sharp, observant. Every glance, every shift, every moment that felt even slightly off. Jungkook did the same. They didn't look at each other. Not directly, but they were aware. Completely. Minutes passed. Then more. Nothing. Or at least, nothing obvious. Jimin's frustration began to creep in, slow and subtle. If someone was watching, they were good at hiding it. Too good. The music stopped again. "Break," someone called out. The room relaxed slightly, tension easing as people moved, grabbed water, checked their phones. Jimin stayed where he was, pretending to catch his breath. But his eyes moved. Scanning. Observing. And then, he noticed it. A glance. Quick. Barely there. From across the room. Jimin's gaze shifted just slightly, careful not to make it obvious. Someone was watching. Not directly. Not openly. But there was something in the way their attention lingered, just a second too long, before looking away. Jimin's chest tightened. He didn't react. Didn't move. But he filed it away. Jungkook noticed it too. Of course he did. Their eyes didn't meet, but the shift in energy between them was enough. They both felt it. There was something there. Jimin grabbed a bottle of water, unscrewing the cap slowly, using the movement as an excuse to glance again. The same person. Casual. Relaxed. But not quite. Jimin's grip tightened slightly around the bottle. Jungkook moved closer, just enough to speak without drawing attention. "Don't stare," he murmured under his breath. "I'm not," Jimin replied quietly. "You are," Jungkook said. Jimin exhaled softly, forcing his gaze away. "You saw it too." "Yeah." Jimin's voice dropped even lower. "Do you think it's them?" Jungkook hesitated. "I don't know," he admitted, "but it's something." Jimin nodded faintly. The tension built again, quieter this time, more controlled, but just as intense. "We need more than a glance," Jungkook said. "We need proof." Jimin's jaw tightened. "Then we get it." Jungkook looked at him. "How?" Jimin didn't answer immediately. Instead, he took another slow sip of water, his mind already moving, already planning. "Then, I give them something to react to," he said. Jungkook frowned. "What?" Jimin met his eyes briefly, just for a second. something they won't be able to ignore. Jungkook's expression shifted instantly. No. Jimin raised an eyebrow. No. That's risky, Jungkook said, his voice low but firm. If you push too hard, they'll know you're onto them. Not if I do it right, Jimin replied. Jungkook shook his head slightly. Jimin. Trust me, Jimin said. The words hung between them. Heavy. Familiar. Jungkook studied him, tension flickering across his face. You asked me not to shut you out, he said quietly. Jimin held his gaze, and you promised you wouldn't. Jungkook exhaled slowly. Fine, he said, but we do this carefully. Jimin nodded. Carefully, he agreed. The break ended. The music started again. And this time, Jimin made his move. It was subtle, almost invisible. A shift in timing. A glance in the wrong direction. A moment that looked like a mistake, but wasn't. He let his focus slip just enough. And then, he saw it again. That same reaction. That same attention snapping toward him. Too quick. Too sharp. Jimin's heart pounded harder. There it was. Jungkook saw it too. And this time, there was no doubt. Someone was watching. And worse, they were reacting. Do it again. Jungkook's voice was low, but there was no mistaking the urgency beneath it. Jimin didn't look at him. His chest rose and fell as he steadied his breathing, sweat clinging to his skin under the harsh rehearsal lights. The music still pulsed faintly in the background, but everything else, the voices, the movement, felt distant, muffled by the sharp awareness coiling in his gut. I will, Jimin murmured. Jungkook stepped closer, just enough for his words to brush against Jimin's ear without drawing attention. Not too obvious. Jimin let out a quiet, almost breathless scoff. You think I don't know that? Jungkook's jaw tightened. I think you're pushing. Jimin turned his head slightly, their eyes meeting for the briefest second. Electric, charged, dangerous. And I think you're hesitating, Jimin shot back. Something flickered in Jungkook's expression. Not anger, not exactly. Fear. It vanished just as quickly. Then prove me wrong, Jungkook said. The music restarted. Jimin moved. Every step was precise, every motion controlled, but beneath it all, there was intention, a deliberate unraveling hidden inside perfection. He let his rhythm slip again. A fraction too late. A fraction too sharp. Something only someone watching closely would notice. And they did. Jimin felt it before he saw it. That shift. That pull. Like a thread tightening invisibly around him. His pulse spiked. There. Again. Jimin's gaze flickered up just slightly. And caught it. Not just a glance this time. A reaction. Subtle but unmistakable. A stiffening posture. A pause that lasted half a second too long. Jimin's breath hitched. Got you. Jungkook saw it too. His movements didn't falter, but his entire focus sharpened, locking onto the same point Jimin had just identified. The air changed. Tension thickened. The music stopped abruptly. Again, someone called out. But Jimin barely heard it. Because this time, the person didn't look away fast enough. For one split second, their eyes met Jimin's. And something cold passed between them. Recognition. Not confusion. Not curiosity. Recognition. Jimin's stomach dropped. They knew. Jimin. Jungkook's voice cut through the noise, low and urgent. Jimin tore his gaze away, forcing his expression back into something neutral, something controlled. Don't react, Jungkook murmured. I'm not, Jimin replied, though his voice was tighter than he intended. You are, Jungkook said again, sharper this time. Jimin clenched his jaw. I said I've got it. Jungkook exhaled through his nose, tension radiating off him in waves. Then act like it. Jimin didn't respond. The rehearsal resumed, but the rhythm felt different now, offbeat, strained, like something unseen had slipped into the room and refused to leave. Minutes passed. Too slow. Too heavy. Jimin could feel it. That presence. That attention. It didn't disappear this time. It lingered. Watching. Waiting. Jungkook shifted closer again during a transition, his voice barely audible. We need to move. Not yet, Jimin said. Jungkook's eyes flashed. If we wait too long. We lose them, Jimin cut in, or worse, we scare them off. Jungkook's lips pressed into a thin line, or they make the first move. Jimin didn't answer, because that thought had already crossed his mind. And it didn't sit well. The music stopped again. Another break. This time, the room felt tighter. Smaller. Like the walls had shifted inward without anyone noticing. Jimin grabbed his towel, dragging it across his neck slowly, using the motion to scan the room again. The same person. Still there. Still watching. But now, more careful. More controlled. Jimin's grip tightened around the fabric. They're adjusting, he muttered. Jungkook followed his line of sight, his expression darkening. Yeah. Jimin exhaled slowly. That means we were right. Jungkook glanced at him. It also means they know we noticed something. Jimin's jaw clenched. Not everything. Jungkook didn't look convinced. We're playing a dangerous game, he said quietly. Jimin let out a humorless laugh. We passed dangerous a long time ago. Jungkook's gaze softened for a fraction of a second. That doesn't mean I'm okay with it. Jimin's expression faltered. Just slightly. But it was enough. Since when do you get to decide what's okay? Jimin asked, his voice lower now, edged with something deeper. Jungkook froze. The question hung between them, heavier than anything else in the room. You think this is about control, Jungkook said slowly. I think you don't trust me, Jimin replied. Jungkook's eyes sharpened. That's not. Then what is it? Jimin pressed, his voice rising just enough to carry tension, not volume. Jungkook stepped closer, his presence intense, grounding, overwhelming. It's about keeping you safe. Jimin let out a sharp breath. I don't need you to protect me. Jungkook's expression cracked just for a second. Yeah, he said quietly, you do. Jimin's chest tightened. Anger flared. Hot. Immediate. You don't get to decide that for me, Jimin snapped. Jungkook's jaw clenched, and you don't get to act like this doesn't affect me. It doesn't. Don't, Jungkook cut him off, his voice dropping dangerously low. Don't say that. Jimin faltered. Because the look in Jungkook's eyes. It wasn't just frustration. It was something deeper. Something raw. You think I can just stand here and watch you put yourself in danger? Jungkook continued, his voice tight. You think I can just, ignore it? Jimin swallowed. His anger wavered, replaced by something more complicated. You've ignored me before, Jimin said quietly. The words hit harder than anything else. Jungkook went still. Completely. That's different, he said after a moment. Jimin shook his head. Is it? Jungkook didn't answer. Because he didn't have one. The silence stretched. Heavy. Unforgiving. And then, movement. Subtle. But enough. Jungkook's head snapped slightly to the side, his instincts kicking in instantly. They're leaving, he said under his breath. Jimin's heart skipped. What? Jungkook's eyes were locked on the figure moving toward the door. Now. Jimin didn't hesitate. Then we follow. Jungkook grabbed his wrist before he could take a step. Carefully, he warned. Jimin pulled free, his eyes sharp, determined. I know. But Jungkook didn't look convinced. Not even a little. They moved. Not together. Not obviously. Jimin headed toward the door first, his pace controlled, casual. Jungkook followed a few seconds later. Distance, timing, precision. The hallway outside was quieter, cooler, but the tension, it followed. Jimin's eyes scanned ahead, catching the figure just as they turned the corner. Faster, he muttered. Jungkook's voice came from behind him, steady but urgent. Don't lose control. Jimin didn't respond, because he was already moving faster. The gap closed, step by step. The sound of footsteps echoed faintly against the walls. Closer, closer, and then the figure stopped. Abruptly, Jimin froze. Jungkook nearly collided into him before stopping just in time. The silence that followed was deafening. Slowly, the figure turned, and for the first time, there was no hiding, no distance, no subtlety, just truth. Jimin's breath caught. Jungkook's entire body went rigid, because the face staring back at them was not a stranger, and in that moment, everything they thought they understood shattered. It was you. Jimin's voice came out quieter than he expected, but it carried something heavier than anger, something closer to disbelief, breaking apart into pieces. The figure standing before them didn't flinch, didn't deny it, didn't even try to hide. For a long moment, no one moved. Then the person stepped fully into the light, and everything became painfully, undeniably clear. Jungkook's breath left him in a sharp exhale. Why? The question hung in the air, fragile and loaded. Because it wasn't just about being watched. It was about trust, about betrayal, about all the moments that suddenly felt different in hindsight. The person tilted their head slightly, studying them, not like enemies, not like friends either, but something in between, something colder. You weren't supposed to notice this soon, they said calmly. Jimin let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head, so there was something to notice. Silence. Then, yes. The honesty hit harder than any lie could have. Jungkook's jaw tightened. Start explaining. A faint sigh escaped the other person, as if this had all become inconvenient. It wasn't meant to get this far. Jimin's eyes flashed. That's not an explanation. It's the truth. Jimin stepped forward, tension radiating off him. Then give us the rest of it. For the first time, something shifted in the other person's expression. Not guilt. Not quite. But something close to conflict. You were being monitored, they said finally. Jungkook's voice dropped. By who? A pause. Then, people you don't see, people who don't want to be seen. Jimin frowned. That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting right now. Jungkook took a step forward, his presence suddenly sharper, more dangerous. No, you don't get to do that, not after everything. The other person held his gaze, unshaken. You think I had a choice? Jimin scoffed. There's always a choice. Not when the consequences don't just fall on you. That stopped them. The tension shifted. Jungkook's eyes narrowed slightly. What does that mean? Another pause. Longer this time. Heavier. It means, the person said slowly, that if I didn't do it, someone else would have. and they wouldn't have been careful. Jimin's chest tightened. Careful, he repeated, disbelief creeping into his tone. You call this careful? You're still standing, came the quiet reply. The words landed like a blow. Jungkook's fists clenched at his sides. You've been watching us, recording us, manipulating situations, and you expect us to believe this was for our safety. I expect you to understand that it could have been worse. Jimin shook his head, stepping back like he needed distance just to breathe. No, don't twist it like that. Don't make this sound like you were protecting us. I was. The certainty in that answer was unsettling. Jungkook let out a humorless laugh. Then why hide it? Because you wouldn't have let me stay. The truth in that statement silenced them both. Jimin's thoughts spun, trying to piece everything together. The glances, the tension, the feeling of being watched. You said we were being monitored, he said slowly. Are we still? The other person hesitated. And that hesitation was answer enough. Jungkook's voice dropped to a near whisper. How deep does this go? No response. Jimin looked at Jungkook, something unspoken passing between them. Fear, realization, something darker. We're not safe, Jimin said quietly. Jungkook didn't argue. Because he knew it too. The other person exhaled softly. That's why I stayed close. Jimin's eyes snapped back to them. You don't get to say that like it makes this okay. I'm not saying it does. Then what are you saying? A pause. Then. I'm saying you need to decide what matters more right now, being angry at me or staying ahead of what's coming. The words settled heavily. Because as much as Jimin hated it, they weren't wrong. Jungkook ran a hand through his hair, packing once before stopping again. If we work with you, he said carefully, this stops, no more secrets. A faint, almost sad smile appeared. You're asking for something I can't promise. Jimin's patience snapped. Then we're done here. He turned, ready to walk away, to end it, to shut it all down. But Jungkook grabbed his arm. Wait. Jimin pulled slightly, but Jungkook's grip held firm, not forceful but grounding. Listen, Jungkook said, his voice low but steady. Jimin met his eyes, frustration burning. To what, Mori lies? To the truth we can get. Jimin hesitated. Because despite everything, Jungkook wasn't wrong either. The silence stretched. Then slowly, Jimin exhaled and stopped resisting. Jungkook turned back, his gaze sharp. You said it could be worse, prove it. The other person studied them both, as if weighing something unseen. Then finally, fine. 3 seconds. That's all the warning they got. Before everything changed. A sudden noise echoed down the hallway. Footsteps. Fast. Too fast. Jimin's heart slammed against his ribs. That doesn't sound good. It's not, the other person said quietly. Jungkook's entire body tensed. We need to move, now. Too late. The words barely left their lips. Before shadows appeared at the far end of the hallway. Not one. Not two. Mori. Jimin's breath hitched. You've got to be kidding me. Jungkook stepped slightly in front of him without thinking, his instincts taking over. Stay behind me. Jimin frowned, anger flickering even now. I told you I don't need. I know, Jungkook cut in, not taking his eyes off the approaching figures, but I'm still doing it. Something in his voice made Jimin stop. Not control. Not doubt. Something else. Something that felt like choice. The footsteps grew louder. Closer. The air tightened, heavy with anticipation. Then, the other person stepped forward, positioning themselves between Jungkook, Jimin, and the approaching threat. I'll handle this part, they said. Jimin's eyes widened slightly. What? You wanted proof, they replied without looking back. This is it. Jungkook frowned. What are you? Go. The command was sharp. Final. Jimin hesitated. Jungkook didn't. He grabbed Jimin's wrist again, this time not to stop him, but to pull him back. We don't have time, Jungkook said. Jimin's eyes flickered between them, conflict tearing through him. We can't just leave. Yes, you can. Jimin froze. Because for the first time, there was no calm in their voice. No distance. Just urgency. Raw and real. If you stay, they continued, you become part of something you're not ready for. Jungkook's grip tightened. Jimin. Jimin swallowed hard. Every instinct screamed at him to stay. To fight. To understand everything. But another part of him, the part that had learned, the part that had changed, knew when to choose survival. Slowly, reluctantly, he stepped back. Jungkook didn't waste another second. He pulled Jimin with him, moving quickly down the opposite direction. The last thing Jimin saw was the other person standing alone, facing what was coming. Unmoving, unafraid. Then, they turned the corner, and everything disappeared behind them. The silence that followed was deafening. Jimin's breathing was uneven as they finally stopped, far enough that the noise had faded into nothing. He pulled his wrist free, turning to Jungkook. We left them. Jungkook's chest rose and fell, his own breath heavy. We didn't have a choice. There's always a choice, Jimin shot back, then froze. Because those words, they echoed. From earlier. From before. Jungkook looked at him, something soft but strong in his expression. Yeah, he said quietly, and this time we made it together. Jimin's anger faded, replaced by something deeper. Something quieter. He exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. This isn't over. Jungkook shook his head slightly. No. Their eyes met. And for the first time since everything began, there was no distance between them. No walls. No silence filled with things unsaid. Just understanding. Whatever came next, they would face it. Together. The world around them felt different now. Bigger. More dangerous. But also clearer. Jimin glanced back once, toward the hallway they had left behind. Toward the answers they didn't get. Toward the truth that still lingered, just out of reach. Then he turned forward again. And kept walking. Not because he had all the answers, but because he finally knew. He didn't have to face them alone. And somewhere, deep beneath the tension, beneath the fear, beneath the uncertainty, there was something steady, unbreakable, something that had survived everything thrown at it. Trust. Not perfect, not easy, but real. And this time, that was enough.